Welcome to the video guide for Jaldabaoth's Piercing Gale Legend, the second Legend Sinister Dominion fight released as part of patch 2.14.0 of Dragalia Lost. As with Lilith before him, Jaldabaoth flips the element swap mechanic to start you off with a wind team for the first half, before swapping to flame for the second half. As always, my name is Xenozilus, and let's get straight to it. Jaldabaoth's fight doesn't change a whole lot in terms of mechanics, save for the two sets of scales on the map and a new Twisted Blessing debuff that interacts with the scales. While mechanically simple, the scales have a pretty strong influence on how the run plays out. As the fight begins, you'll notice the sets of scales on the top left and bottom right points of the arena. The top left scale will deal scaling damage between 600 and 3000 and mark all adventures for the first 5 uses, and will deal 99,999 for the 6th touch, so maximum of 5 touches. Touching the scale, however, will increase the counter on Jaldabaoth's tome by 1. This starts at 5, so you'll want to get the 5 touches on this scale as soon as possible. Be mindful of the damage, however, as hitting your team for 3000 damage while there's an existing corrosion debuff is unwise. As for the bottom right scale, this one interacts with the Twisted Blessing debuff. Each time you touch it, the scale will cleanse the debuff off players in a small AoE centered on the scale, while also decreasing the tome counter by 1. This will always cleanse your whole team in solo, but in co-op you'll need to coordinate with your team to gather around the scale when removing the debuff. As for Twisted Blessing itself, Jaldabaoth will periodically apply this debuff on the team. It's permanent and also stacks. While debuffed, you'll do decreased damage for each stack of the debuff and also be unable to transform. This debuff will also be applied through Dragon form. While you won't get forced out of Dragon, you'll still deal reduced damage and be unable to transform again once your Dragon form ends. For a general rule of thumb, you'll want to remove Twisted Blessing whenever you get to 2 stacks. This will allow you to Dragon and also prevent the damage reduction from becoming too oppressive. As for the top left scale, you'll want to hit it all 5 times as soon as possible, so long as you can survive the damage. Note that the counter on the left scale doesn't reset with the team change, so don't try and hit it a 6th time on your flame team. Believe it or not, that's actually it for new mechanics. The Jaldabaoth fight is pretty congruent with the previous difficulties, barring the scales, debuff and the starting tome counter. So general rules to follow. Touch the top left scale 5 times as soon as possible. Touch the bottom right scale whenever you reach 2 stacks of the Twisted Blessing debuff. Bring midcards Alma 0 and big AoE skill shares such as Gala Masculine or Eugene, rotating between these options to wave clear when necessary, keeping in mind that mechanics involving the summons, portals and orbs are always accompanied by a slightly delayed wave of mobs. You'll be dealing with much of the same in Flame, so the advice of big AoE skill shares holds fast. Otherwise, everything else comes down to team building and then figuring out your team's rotations to deal with each wave of mobs. In co-op, your healer will generally take charge of hitting the left scale, as they'll be the one aware of hit point levels, corrosion and availability of heals. Ideally, the healer will have touched the left scale 4 times before halfway through the first phase, fitting in the final touch for 3000 damage when it's safe, or just before the phase change. In general, I've heard that this fight greatly prefers a coordinated team to manage the Twisted Blessing debuff, as you'll need to congregate by the bottom right scale when removing the debuff due to the AoE effect of the bottom right scale. Team building wise, it generally comes down to bringing characters with big AoEs, midcards Alma 0 for the wind half of the fight, and either Gala Leonidas or Gatov for the flame half. That's not to say that the fight is impossible without them, but the relentless waves of enemies and the fact that removing the Twisted Blessing debuff will decrease the tome counter makes it pretty punishing to allow more than a couple of mobs to slip through. Healer-wise, people generally lean towards Akasha and the Twins for the amp support, but again, that's not to say you can't use other healers at all. I'm sure that both Lowens and Noel could see some use. If you have further questions, feel free to leave a comment or pop by my Twitch streams. I stream Wednesdays and Saturdays at 9:30 PM UTC. As always, take it easy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.